From the public sector partners' practical point of view, they've instituted a number of things like the Lord Provost's volunteering award, so that's kind of Lord Mayor's award sort of thing, and they've committed money to. And some of the other partners, NHS Lothian and Lothian Borders Police, have now got volunteering frameworks in place. In the NHS in Scotland has been doing a big bit of work supported by Volunteer Development Scotland in making sure that there's a volunteer framework for the whole of NHS Scotland, and that's sort of dovetailed and working well with that locally. And the final bit there about investors in volunteering, I don't know if that's a model that you use here much at the kind of the quality standard for volunteering, but it's been one of the things that the public partners, being risk averse and being fond of process, have been quite keen to say to us in the voluntary sector, well, how can you make sure that volunteering is good? How can you make sure that people get a good experience? How can we put some sort of quality assurance system in place with this? And the Investors in Volunteering programme, which is led in Scotland by VDS, is something that we've locally embraced quite strongly, and the council has invested twice in fact. I mean, with the volunteering strategy, there's been a financial investment in small organisations going through the Investors in Volunteering process because it's a relatively expensive standard, so there's been a bursary system to let small organisations go through it, and that's volunteer-only organisations as well as others. But they've also, as the council themselves, started to make a commitment to doing it for their own engagement of volunteers, because one of the big pushes of the volunteer strategy is not only about supporting third sector organisations, but it's actually about getting the public sector itself to be much better at its own engagement of volunteers. And certainly in the council, there are massive numbers of volunteers in health and social care, in schools, in a whole range of things. Now, they haven't quite managed to bite it off for the whole council at the moment, but certainly the health and social care department, the social work department, has committed to taking its department through that, which involves a lot of volunteers, but most importantly involves a lot of work in getting new bits of the council to start taking on volunteers, so things like care homes and units working with people with learning disabilities and things like that, that would always have shied a bit clear of direct involvement of volunteers, are now being encouraged to think, how can we actually let either our users participate as volunteers and or people come in and volunteer. An interesting challenge in that has been getting the council to cope with the risk averseness that it kind of faces very strongly. So one of the test cases, if you like, we've had a volunteer who we've been working with the council volunteering officer, who is a man with a mild learning disability, a significantly dodgy criminal record, and very poor self-esteem and skills. But his record was a long time ago, and he's been very keen to get back into engagement. And we've been working with the council, actually with their HR services, to use them as a test case, if you like, to say, you've put a commitment out here to engage somebody, to engage with volunteers and to get rid of the barriers. Can you make it work? They're struggling with it, but as of last week, after about a year, this volunteer is now volunteering in a council service, in a garden, properly supported, properly monitored, and actually, we're kind of seeing it as a kind of real wedge in the door to say, you can do this and you can do more of it, rather than what usually happens is that council officers will refer out to the voluntary sector, all of their client group who they feel are difficult and hard to place, and the voluntary sector picks them up, so there's a bit about trying to push that forward. Other minor thing, not minor really, youth volunteering, when we need much more work to happen in education, but quite a lot is happening, and there are peer education projects starting to happen in schools. Scotland doesn't have citizenship as a separate curriculum item, but the citizenship is embedded across subjects, so there's a very strong kind of commitment to kind of pushing it forward in schools, and we're really pleased to be pushing volunteering kind of further through that. But just some of the challenges. One of the things that's been interesting in the last 6 months is that all of this very positive working together is now being challenged by the economic downturn largely. And there are two challenges to that. One is there is a really significant increase in the numbers of volunteers coming through the doors of agencies. For us at the Volunteer Centre in Edinburgh, there's been a 40% increase in the same numbers in the last 6 months than in the previous year. And it's people who are facing redundancy and becoming unemployed. And Edinburgh is generally a city of very high employment, so it's relatively new. But B, it's also many, many people who are kind of picking up on the zeitgeist of the corporate banking world has gone bad, so let's do something good. And there's a real groundswell of more volunteers coming through, who might work in the corporate sector and just say, actually, I want to do something that doesn't feel as tarnished as this world. I want to do the good stuff and get involved. So there's a big, big upswell of volunteering, but at the same time, there are really significant public sector funding cuts and budget cuts, and we all listened to the budget yesterday. So the resourcing to help support and make that happen is being really squeezed, and we're hearing daily of volunteer managers dropping off, of projects losing funding. So our challenge ahead for the volunteer strategy in the partnership is how can we embrace and welcome the new goodwill of people to want to volunteer, and also the needs of people who want to volunteer as a route towards employment, at the same time as doing all of that in a restricted financial environment. I haven't got an answer on the back of a postcard to that, but it is going to significantly kind of change the way we do our work ahead. And just finally, the other thing that is a challenge for us, and again it was one of the things that David Blunkett touched on, is the challenge of the way the public sector efficiencies are going to impact on the voluntary sector. So the tendering and contracting process, which really forces people into a different way of doing business, is in real danger of jeopardising the number of community groups and small voluntary organisations and grassroots activity by shoehorning the organisations into coming together to provide services in a much more corporate and public sector way. So our big challenge is to kind of, within the framework of the compact, because it's there, to be able to say at those top tables, if you do this, this is what will happen, and actually kind of articulate those voices and try and make it not happen. And that's all from me, so thank you very much.